Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Latte Wash Processed Panama from Passenger Coffee. And there's the container right there. And let me go ahead and take you through the container because we have special artwork since this is a special release. Information on the side, Hacienda La Esmeralda on top, and Lancaster on the bottom, which of course indicates where Passenger is based out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and a coffee roaster that has featured on this channel a number of times before, given that they are one of my favorite coffee roasters in the entire world. And once I got this email release, it's safe to say that this was an immediate must purchase for me, given that Panamanian geishas are my favorite coffee in the entire world, but most specifically those that do come from Hacienda La Esmeralda. And that kind of leads into the release in general, as alongside this they also released the Esmeralda estate. And I asked a lot of people what prompted their decision to purchase which one of those two Panamanian geishas, and the answer I kept getting was that the Esmeralda estate just sounded a little better. And I'll be completely honest, if I had no familiarity with either of those two farms, then I probably would have skewed towards the Esmeralda estate myself, as it definitely did sound like a more vibrant and just kind of fun coffee in general. However, I'm fortunate enough to have had an opportunity to try as many Panamanian geishas as I have in my life, and that has led to a preference, as the Hacienda La Esmeralda is my favorite coffee in the entire world, and that was kind of indicated last year when it was the Esmeralda Tumaco from Say that finished as our number 2 coffee of 2021, and that's followed closely by the Hartmann, and then of course we've reviewed a number of Jansen's and even an Esmeralda estate on this channel. With all of that being said, Panamanian geishas in general tend to be better than even the higher end coffees from other origins for me specifically, so I've definitely developed a taste and preference for these coffees in general, and it's always the most fun to discuss them. I'm very much looking forward to discussing this one. This right here is day 27 of this coffee. And after our natural processed Ethiopia review, I went back and looked at Passenger's recipe, and it is correct. It is a 15.625 to 1 water to coffee ratio brewed at 210 degrees Fahrenheit. And I don't know if I necessarily had a preference. I'll go V60 on this one, which indicates a more medium fine grind. Passenger is a light American for the roast profile. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. So day 14, which was the first impression, and as we also alluded to in the natural processed Ethiopia review, there was a little bit of a water issue. So this one was also brewed with that same water issue, and as a result it's kind of a throwaway day, but I still have to note what we had actually experienced from it, and it was a lot more citric than expected. It had a lighter tasting sweetness to the cup, slight bit more body than expected, and it was a bit more lively but delicate. It was an unusual first impression, it was an uneven first impression, but again that's kind of attributed to the fact that the water was off in general. So ignore that day. We came back day 17, ran it through the Chemex, and it was a slight bit more delicate than expected, even for a Panamanian geisha. Sweetness, relatively moderate, so possible adjustments were going to need to be needed. Light florals once again, citric and acidic, both subdued a bit more in this brew method, so not necessarily the best day, and I'm thinking maybe this one isn't it. However, I was wrong by the next day. Day 19, coffee found its perfect stride, and it was the best day of the coffee by far. Radiated vintage Panamanian geisha-like aspects in the sense that it had my favorite flavor note in all of coffee, which I often describe as Fruity Pebbles. And the reason I describe it as Fruity Pebbles is a number of things. These Panamanian geishas tend to be super floral. These white flowers, they tend to be citric as well, and they can even have a slight grainy quality, which in essence all of those things kind of translates to the way Fruity Pebbles taste. So when I was experiencing this on day 19, it's the thing I seek the most in all of coffee. It's the reason that the Esmeralda coffees, as well as the Hartmann coffees, are my 2 favorite coffees in the entire world, because these are the ones I'm most likely to get this kind of Fruity Pebble-like aspect to a cup of coffee. It was wonderful. This was the best day of the coffee I had experienced, and it was through a standard recipe, 16 to 1, 205, and it was right here on day 19, and that's what I really like to highlight, is just how amazing and impressed I was with this coffee on this day. Day 21, a slight bit more sweetness through the Chemex, and it seemed like there was an almost like sweet custard-like feel to this cup of coffee, and possibly just general improvement overall, as there was a little less of the Fruity Pebbles characteristic to it. It was still an exceptional cup of coffee nonetheless. I was beginning to suspect that the coffee, probably based off the roast profile, was just improving as it had settled a little bit more, getting a little bit more vibrant, which was actually certainly the case, as right here on day 23, adjusted it to Passenger's recipe, and I'm going to complain about the most first world coffee problem of all time. I didn't like it as much through the recipe because it was actually too vibrant and flavorful. It was spot on with their descriptor that they did have on their website, and I think they had stuff listed like custard, like vanilla custard, and kiwi, and florals, and honeysuckle, and you got all of it. There was so much depth, complexity, sweetness, florality, and citrus in this cup of coffee that it matched their notes 100% perfectly. However, since I was experiencing slightly less of that fruity pebble-like aspect, I liked it a little less. I enjoyed the delicacy of these Panamanian geishas, probably as one of the most important things to them. So having this cup of coffee be a little bit more vibrant, again, it's kind of a first world problem complaint that it was too accurate, it was too vibrant, and it was too fun tasting for me. Day 27, so this is the final day that we had for this coffee. It has just intensified overall, and that's what I've kind of been saying, is that this coffee just got really sweet, it got a lot more vibrant, and as a result there was plenty of distinctly, well, floral and citric-like aspects to this cup of coffee. Classic Panamanian geisha in that sense, abundance of florals, creamy sweetness, complemented by a heavy bit of citrus. So much depth in this cup of coffee, not too surprising. That's why I say these Panamanian geishas are incredible, is because you just get so much from these coffees, and Passenger does a great job of highlighting all of those aspects to them. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we were getting. And 3 level 5s, let's run through those real quick. The cleanliness, I didn't even bother to mention the cleanliness, but that's of course because it is a Panamanian geisha, and that's the epitome of how clean a cup of coffee can get. It was always going to reach that level 5 mark, no surprises there whatsoever. Florals level 5, the floral that they had listed on here was honeysuckle, and I could see that. It did skew a little bit more towards that, I hate to say it, generic white flower aspect of Panamanian geishas, but it definitely had that in abundance, huge abundance, hence the level 5, not too surprising. The super clean base allows for the more subtle flavors to make a more pronounced and lingering, I don't want to say this, impact on the coffee in general. So as a result, the florals level 5, I don't think that one's too surprising either. And then the citrus fruit level 5, I feel like that one increased the more I was drinking this coffee, as it wasn't necessarily the most pronounced thing earlier on, but the more and more I was drinking this coffee, the more vibrant and intense it became. The citrus was definitely justified at that level 5 mark. Body level 1, again, classic Panamanian geisha aspect. And then the other things we must discuss, the sweetness level 4. Surprisingly, it was actually slightly on the sweeter side, so I would actually say a higher side of that level 4, and then the finish, which I don't think I was necessarily expecting this much of a lasting finish in this cup of coffee, given that these tend to be super delicate and gentle. It had quite a bit of a finish to it, and it's on the lower side of the level 4. I probably could have put it on the higher side of the 3, but I think just based off of surprise, I was more than willing to put it on that higher mark of things. Anything else worth noting? I don't think so. Acidity is kind of moderate. Slight bitterness. I think they have lemon zest listed on here, and that would make a lot of sense. Yeah, not too much else. I think I just charred the caramel to kind of highlight just how much sweetness there was in this cup of coffee, because there was a bit of sugar sweetness that I wasn't necessarily expecting to it. All right, my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. First things first, it lived up to the expectation, and given that my expectations were legitimately through the roof, that's impressive. This right now is my favorite coffee of the year, and it's a strong contender to finish as my favorite coffee of 2022. And it came in as this huge favorite with these sky-high expectations, and the fact that it was able to live up to those and just demonstrated the wonderful aspects and complexity of Panamanian geishas in general, then it's not too surprising that I have so many positive things to say about it. Even my biggest complaint and grievance about this coffee is something that I look for in pretty much every other coffee. It had too much wonderful flavor to it. What kind of complaint is that? Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, if you've never had a Panamanian geisha, especially if you've never had anything from Hacienda La Esmeralda, I definitely think they're always worth trying, because you can just enjoy these super clean aspects of coffees. I've heard people complain that the too light-bodied, too delicate coffees are coffees that they don't necessarily enjoy. I feel like maybe with a little bit more persistence, maybe you can come around to these coffees, as there's a reason that they're the most expensive and luxurious coffees in general, and they're oftentimes the most sought after coffees. I feel like they're just the best coffees in the world, honestly. So if you've never tried one before, I would suggest you just at least give it a shot, or if you haven't been a biggest fan of these coffees in general, I feel like that this one's a really good one to kind of get your feet wet with something like this. It can be a little complex, it can be a little tricky, but I think that makes it so much more fun. I think for the most part, though, I'll leave this review at that. If you've by chance had an opportunity to try this one or the Elita Estate, we'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it or that one as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Lotte Wash Processed Panama from Passenger Coffee. Thank you for watching.